Sunday Surefire Podcast. It's your host this week, Aaron Downtown Brown. I got the co-host with me, the commish.
Hello, hello.
Commish, how we doing, man? How we doing?
We're hanging in there, man. It's been a while since I dropped the hello, hello here out of the gate. Usually I'm the one over in the host chair. So we decided to give you a try out here to see what it's like with you hosting with me on the pod. So you do a good job when I'm not around here, but we'll see how you do with me across from you.
Hey, just like in preseason, we don't have all the starters aren't always in that first quarter, so it's good to kind of switch it up, go through QB2 here and there. So, um I'm thinking this should be a pretty fun episode. We have had quite a bit of news to go over this preseason, so I know you're kind of chomping at the bit to kind of get your hands on some of these topics. So I'm gonna leave a lot of that up to you today, kind of give your thoughts over some of the preseason headlines, and then we also have a special guest later this episode as well, where we actually have the winner of our Sunday Surefire Invitational Best Ball League from year one of a year ago, season ago. And so that should be a very fun interview. Kind of go over just some best ball tips that the champion kind of used last year and took down the whole Sunday Surefire gauntlet that we'll learn about as well.
Yeah, the champ is going to be in the building coming up here. That's going to be a good discussion you and him will have. But like you said, a lot of items around the league to touch on first. So can't wait to do that.
That's right. So actually, let's just jump right into it and talking news. I think it's really been the number one highlight of the preseason so far is Brandon Ayuk and his situation. Is he going to get traded? Is he not? I know we've kind of given our thoughts here and there, but just what's your take over on the whole Brandon Ayuk saga?
Yeah, man, the saga continues. That's the right word for it at this point. I mean, months and months of speculation with no definitive answer coming yet. When it started, the 49ers came out and said they weren't going to trade him after Ayuk requested to be moved. Then we had deals in place with the Browns and my hometown New England Patriots, as well as the Steelers. Ayuk didn't want to go to Cleveland or New England, understandable, but he was open to go to Pittsburgh. But ideally, he'll stay in San Francisco on the right deal. The 49ers presented him with a new offer, and then it's been kind of cold on that front over the last few days. So that's more or less where we are right now. According to Adam Schefter, who came out earlier today, said we should expect some type of resolution this week in all likelihood, which makes sense with the season right around the corner. The final week of preseason is upon us coming up this week, so they really need to figure out what they're gonna do with Brandon Ayuk. He needs to figure out where he wants to play football next. I've been on the record on this show for months here saying that the 49ers are not going to trade him. So I'll stick with that and say that he's not going to be going anywhere. San Fran, as we know, they're a win now team. They came up just short of your Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl last year. So they're still hunting that championship. And the best way for them to do that in 2024 is with someone like Brandon Ayuk on the roster this season. And I think they find a way to get it done for that reason. I mean, the 49ers know. I mean, they've used the word urgency lately to get a contract done. They know that's what's best for him from a real football standpoint. So I'm going to stick with it and say that he'll be a 49er for not just this year, but for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. I mean, he's in a situation where I think the Niners know his worth the best, right? I mean, around the league, I mean, he is kind of looked at. I know he's got special skills, but I mean, he is the wide receiver too there. I don't think the whole wide receiver documentary really helped him, where as much as they really talked up Debo in that series too, so that wasn't great publicity for him. But I mean, he's probably not getting he's not happy with the offers he's seeing out there, kind of testing the market, especially a year where Jefferson gets paid, CeeDee's trying to get paid. It's really not great timing for him anyway. So, yeah, I think the Niners truly know his worth, and that's probably the best spot for him to stick to. But yeah, I'm just hoping for my George Pickens shares he does not go to the Steelers. So I hope I hope that stays true there for you there,
Yeah,
Commish.
yeah, you're trying to avoid the grenade that is Brandon Ayuk coming over to Pittsburgh to knock out some George Pickens upside. Definitely. I mean, it's been speaking of fantasy, think about it. I agree. Like he's for fantasy for this year, he's better off in San Francisco than anywhere else. And which is interesting because we've talked about Brandon Ayuk all offseason saying the guy's an efficiency monster. He's top 10 in yards per route run and efficiency, everything like great against man, great against zone. Like he's such a monster, but if he ever got more volume, that he would be one of the best receivers in the league from a fantasy standpoint versus a high end WR2 where he's been finishing the last couple seasons. But at this point, guys, it's the middle of August. Like we're running out of time here for him to develop chemistry with either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. We'll talk more about that situation going forward. But at this point, like I would rather him stay in San Francisco where he's comfortable and like just where he knows the playbook, where he knows his role, he fits right in. Like maybe it'll take him a couple of weeks to ramp up from not doing much of anything at all in training camp. But I just think at the moment, his where he's going might be a little too expensive. WR 16 and number 33 overall per Fantasy Pros average draft position. That's a little rich for my blood, but I do think at this point in time, he's better off sticking in San Francisco for the 2024 season from a fantasy lens.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. I think I dig it there. But I think we mentioned one other team in that conversation, one of the teams he may be interested in. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Um, I think, as dynasty managers, if you had Justin Fields shares, you're kind of anxiously kind of seeing how that QB battle's gonna partake here in this preseason, just how, week one and beyond goes. So what's your take over the Steelers QB battle?
My take is that the Steelers continue to sputter at the QB position in the post Ben Roethlisberger era, and they shipped the former number one overall quarterback Kenny Pickett across the state to Philadelphia in the early going of the offseason. They signed Russell Wilson for pennies on the dollar, and they trade for Justin Fields. And you know the saying, Aaron, if you got two quarterbacks, it means you don't have one. And I think that's kind of more or less where they're at. They don't have an answer for who's even going to be starting for them under center at this point, which is unsettling. I mean, Wilson is probably the leader in the clubhouse. They said as much. Mike Tomlin said as much coming into training camp, but he had a calf injury that held him back. Justin Fields flashed early on in camp. He's been a little bit up and down since. So it's not really one guy taking the job by the reins, which kind of I think the Steelers are hoping they'd be a little bit further along in that process at this point in the offseason. If I were a betting man, I would say Wilson gets the nod for week one just based on his pedigree in the league. But I think he'll be on a short leash. But if it were me personally, if the commission was making the decision, I'd be going with Justin Fields, man. I mean, like I just see Wilson as old news at this point. I mean, he's an aging player. He's on his third team in 4 years for a reason. He's not getting any better. And Fields just is younger. He's more dynamic. He gives them an element with his legs that Wilson really doesn't at this point in his career. And I just think that the Steelers offense really needs that because they're a team that, yeah, they had George Pickens, who, you like him and all that. But outside of him, they don't have a ton at wide receiver. Pat Fryer is interesting at tight end, but this they want to run the ball and play defense and all that, kind of that typical what you think of when you think of Steeler football. But the league's changing now. You can't really just get away with running the ball and playing defense like you could at the start of the Mike Tomlin era in the mid 2000s. So I think Fields is the way to go for this team if it were up to me, just because he has that extra dimension that he can give them in the rushing department. And I just kind of trash Pittsburgh, but I think it's a better situation than he had at any point in Chicago. So I'd be more intrigued with Fields over Wilson, but I think Wilson will get the nod to start week one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think Wilson's also the week one starter. I'm just looking at Tomlin's history where I know how you feel on the inside over Tomlin and the Steelers in the in recent history, but um with Tomlin, he has proven he can win without having stud QBs. And I do look at just where they are in both of their careers that I think it's more of a risk with Fields, where I think Tomlin would probably be more comfortable with a vet like Wilson. But yeah, I don't really like that dynamic of having like two competitive QBs anymore. I think just the QB position has risen so high in the NFL that you just got to have your guy. It's not like the 90s where, you can throw in subs here and there. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's got to be Wilson, but I also don't it as a fan, sometimes you hate it because you start losing, you start wondering, oh, well, what if they put in Fields, So I don't like that. And if you're a Steelers fan, that's kind of they hopefully they don't start losing because then I know you're gonna start thinking that too.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot, and I mean, my knock on Mike Tomlin is really the winning come playoff time. He can keep a team competitive and in the mix. Like all their games matter. They're competitive, which there is something to be said for that. They've never finished, below 500, and there is something to be said for that. My issue is if I were a Steelers fan and I'm not, if I went, they've gone 7 years without winning a playoff game. Like when Mike Tomlin took over that job, it was let's win one for the other thumb here. Let's win our sixth Super Bowl. And now Steelers fans just tell me that it's okay to go 9-8 and then get destroyed in your first playoff game in the years that you make it that far. So like I just look at that and I say that doesn't really do much for me. Maybe it's because I'm a spoiled Patriots fan who has seen six Super Bowl championships in the last 20 years, whereas Mike Tomlin's getting by on one championship that he won a decade and a half ago. But that's kind of my quick Tomlin aside on that. Just to put a bow on this on the Steelers situation from a fantasy standpoint, I'm not drafting any Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I'm not going to feel confident about that at this point. Maybe I think I Fields I look at it maybe in Dynasty where I say there's going to be probably one opportunity left for Justin Fields to get an opportunity to start, and I want to get if I can get him cheap enough on my team, maybe a late second round pick, rookie pick, future pick, maybe a 26 second round pick. We'll get it done at this point. Who knows? If that's good enough, a second rounder, I might be willing to take a shot on him just to kind of see what he has to offer because he was been really good for fantasy when he's been given the opportunity. So Russ to me is a declining asset. Fields to me is an intriguing one that's got high upside but also a really low floor. So it's a mess in Pittsburgh at the quarterback position, and as a Patriots fan, I kind of know what that's like, unfortunately too. But we'll see how that fits out in the Berg.
Yeah, we certainly will. I guess continuing the quarterback position, we had another set of news, a little bit unfortunate from the dynasty landscape, and that's JJ McCarthy. So very unfortunate, suffering that meniscus tear, right? Set him out for the season. What's your take on that? What does that do for the Viking season? I guess Darnold at the helm. Any takes there?
Yeah, just brutal all around for Minnesota. I mean, there was a lot of hype coming in with the JJ McCarthy pick in the first round. And the season's done before it begins, but the good news, the silver lining, I guess, is that it's a torn meniscus. It's never really been a career ender, given what modern medicine is today, and he should be a full go for 2025. But the Vikings have 17 games to play before we get to 2025, and they're going to look at Sam Darnold to be the answer. And you could call me crazy on this, but I don't think this is necessarily the end of the world for the Vikings in 2024. JJ McCarthy was to me a solid prospect coming out, but it wasn't. I don't see like world beater from day one right away in his repertoire. So I think Darnold, if you just take a quick minute to go back and kind of look at his career, he's bounced around the league at this point, but you can make a case that he's never at any point been set up to succeed as a starter. He was drafted number 3 overall in 2018 to a terrible Jets team, terrible organization. Everything I just said about the Steelers having a high floor is the exact opposite with the Jets. They've been an absolute nightmare for essentially my entire life, and I'm in my mid 30s. So Todd Bowles gets fired at the end of Darnold's rookie season. The Jets, in their infinite wisdom, hire Adam Gase to be their next head coach. We all know how that went down. That was a fun couple years of making jokes. He was Arthur Smith before Arthur Smith. If you remember, Adam Gase was a pincushion for the league, rightfully so. Then Darnold spends 2 seasons in Carolina where he's in and out of the lineup, and another terrible offense, another incompetent head coach in Matt Rule is back in the college ranks for a reason. Spends 2023 as a backup in San Francisco, getting minimal playing time before signing with Minnesota in free agency. But he has a chance now. Like he's in a legit passing offense. We know the Vikings want to chuck the ball around the yard. They've been top 6 in team pass attempts in each of Kevin O'Connell's first 2 seasons as a head coach. That includes the end of last year, the second half of the year, where they're throwing in Josh Dobbs, who had been there for 10 minutes via trade, and guys like Nick Mullins, who have bounced around the league in their own right. So we know that Justin Jefferson is a one-man wrecking crew as the skill positions, and they're going to throw the rock to him a ton. They also have guys like Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson in tow. I know both those guys are banged up at the moment, but they're going to get out there in 2024 as well. We can get into like where I have Darnold in fantasy at the moment, but that's kind of how I see the overall situation in the post McCarthy injury panning out here. Aaron, what are your thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean it's funny when you look at Darnold's history when it's probably arguably his best receivers starting out the gates were Robbie Anderson and probably Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, I know a running back is your best receiver. And CMC is great, but yeah, he's had nothing to throw the ball to, and now he's almost got an embarrassment of riches when healthy.
For sure, for sure. And then, a lot could be said, just kind of sitting through and learning that Shanahan offense. I'm sure he learned a lot over there in San Francisco from that scheme. And then, yeah, and O'Connell's offense is definitely QB friendly as well. So,
Yeah, he's a big
who
bad guy. Exactly right.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, he could flourish, and yeah, he's got Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the league to throw to. So, yeah. I mean, I don't hate it as much as my first reaction was to it. So I mean, I guess we'll definitely see, how the Vikings will go. I mean, I think just overall, it may just depend how well their defense is this year. Where I mean, when if Darnold has to constantly be on the field then I might be a little bit more, worried about it. But maybe if their defense can take a step this year, it might be, a little bit of a help for them.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just say this quickly. I'm not drafting Sam Darnold in your traditional like one quarterback leagues and all that. But if we start talking super flex leagues or a guy, I actually think he could be a guy you could fill in bye weeks for you. I actually have him QB 21 overall. I have ahead of guys like Baker Mayfield, Aaron Rodgers, and Geno Smith, which might be a hot take to some people, and maybe that's a little bit of a surprise. But I mean, I just think that for all the reasons I mentioned, I mean, they want to chuck the ball a lot. I think he's competent enough. And I mean, if you remember, Aaron, there were times in DFS where people were starting Josh Dobbs on
Yeah,
in with Minnesota. Even Nick Mullins had some good weeks too. So I think there's an opportunity in Superflex to get him as your second quarterback if you want to wait on that position. And in Dynasty, I think there's the possibility exists that Darnold becomes a 2023 version of Baker Mayfield, where he puts together a rebound season and kind of a make or break time frame for him. And we're looking at him differently a year from now than we are today. I think that very much could be on the table on the Dynasty front. I put his value somewhere around a late second, where if you're a contending team, maybe you only have two quarterbacks and you want some relatively cheap depth. You take what's probably going to be a late second round pick, and you flip it out the door to the Darnold manager and see if you can get him on your squad. And then you have some insurance, a guy who you could start in a pinch, and who knows, maybe there could be some room for him to accrue in value in his own right with a good season in 2024.
that's true. I mean, with his rushing upside, I mean, look what Sam Howell did last year. Is what like QB 13 or something like that. So.
He was chucking for a while, yeah, until he wasn't.
For sure. So yeah, you never know. But moving on here, here's an unfortunate injury here. Happened to my beloved Chiefs. I'll let you do the honors talking this player, and that was Hollywood Brown. Kind of injured his shoulder. Kind of shaky for week one. I think they compared it to a similar injury that Tyreek Hill had that kept him out about 4 weeks as well. So what are your thoughts on what that does in fantasy with Hollywood Brown's injury?
Yeah, we're looking 4 to 6 weeks for a dislocated sternoclavicular joint. And I'll let you say that 5 times fast. And
No, thank you.
yeah, we'll see how that goes. Yeah, this one's hitting your hometown Chiefs. Brown right out of the gate free agency was kind of looked at as the field stretcher, a role that this Chiefs offense. I say they needed it coming off a back-to-back Super Bowls, but it was a role that needed to fill, and they hammered it pretty hard, both in the form of Brown as a free agent signing, as well as Xavier Worthy in the draft. And that's I guess I'm really going to use this Hollywood Brown injury as a reason to talk up some Xavier Worthy, who is currently going 95th overall in WR40 per Fantasy Pros ADP at the moment in one QB leagues. That's round 8 in a 12 team format. And that's a range where I actually am comfortable taking a shot on Worthy. Maybe with this injury news and drafts really kicking off this week, certainly next week, he's going to creep up to a range where I'm not really necessarily going to take a shot on him. But WR40 sounds about right to me. I think there's a lot of upside in that spot where I'm not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill of 2020, in 2024, like what Tyreek Hill was in his prime, but I think he has that field stretching ability where he can use that ridiculous 4.2 speed to his advantage. And, he's going to have massive plays for this Chiefs offense, especially now that there's actually more to worry about than just Travis Kelce, unlike last season. They got Rashee Rice in the short area of the field. They got Kelce in the short and intermediate areas. And then it's just, at times there's going to be opportunities for Worthy to take the top off the defense, screaming down the field. And he can do a little more than just field stretching too. We should give him credit on that front too. But yeah, I think it's a good spot to take a shot at him in redraft. And I think he's still a first round pick in rookie drafts and dynasty if you haven't had yours yet.
I agree. I mean, it definitely gives Worthy a shot a lot earlier than he probably would have had if Brown was healthy for sure. So it gets him involved in the offense a little bit more, I think, out the gates. Although it is interesting. It's funny. I think a lot of people are now staying away from Hollywood Brown with the injury, but looking at it, it's very insignificant from an injury is what they're hoping. So Hollywood could actually end up turning into being a little sneaky draft player too, because I know in the offseason that Mahomes spoke very highly over Hollywood and saying he can run every route in the tree that he's being asked to too. So I do love it for Worthy, but I also think it's very sneaky with Brown now where people are falling off of him and you can't write him off too fast where I think you look at Mahomes only throwing for the like 4K yards last year, and I think Holly Brown just Hollywood, it's not really just vacated targets. I think it's just room for growth where he could be in the 5,000 yard passing season in 2024 with a healthy Brown.
Yeah, Brown could slip to a point where I want to draft him. He's WR 38 on Fantasy Pros, currently good for 89 overall. So he's actually going a little bit ahead of Worthy. Again, that's probably just leagues not being caught up to the injury news quite yet, and we'll get more data on that in the coming weeks. So he very well could slip out of the top 100 to a point where I'm comfortable drafting him. And it's interesting because one of the things I float around for redraft season, if you still play in leagues that have a defense or a kicker, I'd say one, stop doing that. But two, if you're not going to do that and your league's set on it, like a couple of mine are, but one thing I like to do in leagues that have IR spots that also use a kicker and a defense, where I can, I just don't draft those positions. I don't draft a kicker. I don't draft the defense. What I do is I draft an injured player who's going to miss some time at the start of the year, and I stash them in an IR spot, and then I pick up a kicker or a defense before week one. That's kind of just a little thing that I've done for years, had some success with. So I think Brown missing time out of the gate is a good player to do that with, as well as another guy, TJ Hawkinson, is a guy I'm also targeting to try to do that with. So just a nice little way to get a little bit of advantage. Essentially, lets you roster one or two extra players rather than wasting those draft picks on kickers and defenses that you're just probably going to float in onto and off of your team throughout the season anyway.
I love it. I mean, we can't go without just talking news without dropping some nuggets along the way there too. So love the sharing some of that wisdom there, Kamish.
What we do.
Uh, yeah, that's what we do around here. So two similar stories we just want to touch on here. Two quarterbacks, and that's both Jaden Daniels named Washington starter and Gardner Minshew named starter with the Raiders as well. I guess just give me your take over those two situations and kind of, just your instant reactions over their starting positions.
Yeah, not really surprised in another case that those guys locked down the QB1 roles on their respective teams. I mean, with Daniels, he was locked in from the minute they turned in the card. I mean, there's no one on the depth chart that was ever going to push him. Watching him in preseason, I mean, he's looked pretty good to me. He's getting the ball out quickly. He's hitting that back foot and just let that thing go. He's also using his legs like we knew that he would. Again, 2,000 plus rushing yards over his final two seasons at LSU. Konami code upside, we know that. Ran for a touchdown in his first game, and look, he's a young player. He's going to have bumps along the way, but I'm also on record as being really high on him, and I'm still drafting him all day at his round 9 ADP. My rankings are out on Sunday Surefire.com/blog. I mean, my top 200 is up there. I have him QB9 overall, so he's in my top 10 quarterbacks. He was my flag plant player in our episode last week. I'm going to remain very high on Daniels. I don't think I have anything else to say on him that I haven't said already. Make sure you go back, check those previous episodes if you want all the details on him and why he's going to smash at his round 9 ADP if he sticks around there in the coming weeks. I'll just touch on Minshew quickly, and then you can let me know what you got on him. Raiders starting quarterback sounds good. Wins the quote unquote competition with Aiden O'Connell. I mean, they paid Gardner Minshew in free agency, and they already had Aiden O'Connell on this roster last year, so they more or less knew what he was. For fantasy purposes, I think this is probably the best possible outcome for guys like Brock Bowers and for Devontae Adams. We saw Minshew last season in spot duty, well, not spot duty, but at the drop of a hat became the starting quarterback in Indy in his first year there. He turned Michael Pittman into a wide receiver 15 on a points per game basis last year. So there's hope for me for Adams where he can squeeze out another productive year. Also gives me hope that Brock Bowers can have we'll say, competent quarterback play. I think that he can still, with Minshew there, outperform his TE11 ADP this season. I know that's a guy Ethan planted his flag on pretty firmly last week. So, yeah, best case scenario in both scenarios. Daniel starts for Washington, Minshew starts for the Raiders, and I think for the guys they have to be supported by those quarterbacks. It's about as good as we could have hoped for.
I agree. For sure, in both of those scenarios. I think with Daniels, I'm not really going to touch too much on him. I think it was like from the jump, I think we knew he was the guy there, and yeah, I think he's shown flashes in preseason. I think he's a huge upside this year in fantasy, for sure. So I love Daniels this year and like every format pretty much. So love Daniels, and then even on the Minshew front too. I think that's a good decision for and I hate to say it, but for the Raiders, being a Chiefs fan, I anytime I got to talk highly of the or better or say good things, I guess, about the Raiders. I don't enjoy it, but yeah, I think Minshew's proven he almost led the Colts. I mean, they were a one dropped pass away on a swing play last year to the playoffs that Minshew basically took them there. So, and then I definitely think those two styles of quarterback play from O'Connell and Minshew, we see the big difference in what they bring to the table there too. So. I think, yeah, definitely a higher ceiling now with Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers with Minshew starting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's as good as we could have hoped for those guys, 100%.
For sure. Well, hey, those are some of the top headlines, and if there's a couple more news or players that you want us to go over or talk about, yeah, feel free to message us or tweet to us or any of our socials where we're highly interactive there. We can kind of bring them up or just DM you back too, where we like to stay pretty interactive in all social fronts.
Hell yeah, man. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button too. Like, comment on YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it now, wherever it is. We're available up there, folks. So it's draft season. Don't hesitate to reach out for you, and we're here for you. We're here to help you win money in all your leagues this season.
That's right. So, just this season is around the corner. Pat, I think I'm gonna release you. You can go back to the lab, start crunching all your analyses and what we got next is a very exciting interview, as I said, to kind of talk best ball. Haven't talked it all season. I'm kind of chomping at the bit to kind of talk that league that we're in and we host, but also just it's a fun conversation, kind of switch it up, talk some best ball and get the returning champ into 2024.
Yeah, yeah. Give my regards to the champ and tell him I said congrats and that I'm coming for him this time around.
All right, well, without further ado, here is the interview with Anthony. All right, Anthony, aka TPF, also aka Panther fan underscore 10 on Twitter. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Aaron. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited as we were mentioning on the pod. Excited to have you on the show. Had to bring the champion from our first ever Sunday Surefire Invitational Best Ball League. So definitely excited for this episode. I know we've been talking it all off season. We're on to year two already. We're all drafting. We've expanded it to three leagues. So what do you know? We might actually have a live pick go happening on the show tonight too if you're on the
Yeah.
clock.
Yeah, there's a good chance. We're at the 6.7 and I'm the 10th pick. So we have a round and we got to come back. But yeah, and this is long overdue. I'm so glad to finally be on. So yeah, hopefully somebody can take something good from it.
For sure, for sure. But I guess before we jump into that, we were talking a little bit before we hopped on here. We said, hey, you're a Panther fan living in California. Why don't you kind of walk us through that? And I know you might have a social media page and stuff going on there if you want to take some time talking that first.
Yeah, it's a fun story. I get it a lot out here. I grew up in San Jose, California, so it's a very, 49er, Oakland Raider at the time, Oakland uh, type of place. And growing up, neither team was good. And I just looked at the league holistically. I wanted to just find a player that I could really invest in, and that player was Cam. And so, yeah, when he got drafted that 2011, 2012 season, I just planted my flag with the Panthers. And there were a couple good years and a lot of bad years. Um, and yeah, finally, when COVID hit, everybody was, bound to being a recluse in their apartment or house, whatever. Decided it would be a good time to talk ball with some Panthers fans. I finally, got fed up. I didn't have enough Panther fans to talk to in California. My best friends from home, I got a Packer fan, couple Cowboys fans, Seahawks fans. But nobody Panthers. So we always talked like holistic football, but I wanted to get into the weeds, learn a little bit more about the team history, and just kind of get more of that content. And so, yeah, I took it upon myself, made the page, grew really quickly, and then Elon made some changes. So, but hey, we wouldn't have been connected without it. So, yeah, it's a fun story, and yeah, I'm still there. So,
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we're definitely glad we found you on Twitter, and it's been a pleasure having you in the league. And just on the personal level, I can kind of relate to that. I remember moving out East Coast, being an Iowa boy, right? And kind of, I'm didn't really know any Chiefs fans, right? So it was funny. Saw on a special that when Andy Reid just moved to be the coach of the Chiefs, I think they opened one of the seasons where it was Chiefs Eagles. They did a big like lead up to it, and I found out there was actually a Chiefs bar in Philadelphia. So I was about an hour and a half away from Philadelphia, drove to the Chiefs bar, and I felt right at home. So, I definitely appreciate, opening clubs like that, and because I think we've all been there. When you move away, you kind of get a little homesick, and you kind of look for
totally.
favorites in sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of sports. It's just a great way to find community. And I've had some great interactions with Panthers fans in California thanks to the Twitter. And we've been able to, I think it was 2 years ago, they were here against the Rams. And I had a trip with my fiance to go to Seattle. Funny enough, though, that we planned the trip and then the schedule comes out. I buy the tickets and didn't realize I was double booked. And I was able to sell the tickets to a longtime follower and his daughter. So they got the tickets and they got to go to their first Panther game. So,
Perfect.
granted it was
Hey, make
away
it
and we
happen.
lost, but it's still really cool.
For sure. For sure. Well, yeah, go ahead if you got any Panthers fans out there, go ahead and join Panther fan _10 on Twitter. I know Anthony definitely brings out some good football content, especially if you're a Panthers fan too. But hey, we'll kind of move on to kind of the meat and potatoes of the interview now, and kind of can set the tone a little bit. I know I keep bringing up our Sunday Surefire Fire Best Ball League, and a little bit of details on that. Kind of the idea there is we didn't want to make it just like a regular best ball league from your underdogs, your DraftKings, and stuff like that. We want to put like a little twist to it. So this league was a 16 team, so a little bit deeper in year one. It was also 6 point passing and full point PPR. So as you can imagine, you can have plenty of strategies. It's a different enough league where it's not just a one size fits all type of strategy too. So kind of tried that in year one, and as I said, we're in year two now, and we've expanded to three leagues of 12 now. So the goal here is kind of make it a tournament and kind of see who's the best of the best in the Sunday um, Surefire Invitational now. But Anthony, I thought it would be kind of fun just before we kind of get into some things and it start asking you more, what's your keys to success there. A little bit of a background just over last year with that is one other fun part is we make 7 teams make the playoffs in the 16 team league, and you were actually the seventh seed. So
Yep.
you're kind of the Cinderella story here, where we laugh about it. You actually played all three members of Sunday Surefire, where you beat Kamish in week 15. You went on and to week 16 beat Ethan, and then you beat me in the finals in week 17 last year. So that I
Yeah,
kind of had a fun, congrats to that, but definitely funny that you played all three of us in the playoffs last year.
caught fire and just ran the gauntlet. Yeah, and would like to thank CD Lamb for that.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, CD was a big part, to kind of contribute to your success last year. But I found a few other things interesting about your team as well last year, kind of reviewing a little bit of your strategy, and we'll get into it too, but kind of looking at, looks like you punted the QB last year. You ended up going with Gino as your starting QB, and you had Gino in the seventh and Carr in the eighth, I believe it was. And then a couple other things. You actually drafted Kareem Hunt before he was with the team. He was still a free agent.
Yeah,
They kind of had the guts to grab Kareem before the big Nick Chubb injury last year. And then of course you had CeeDee Lamb and St. Brown in rounds 1 and 2, so they were your studs there. And then you also punted the tight end. You got grabbed Ferguson in the
mhm.
13th round as well. So couple little bit of background, but I find that, it wasn't just CD. I'm sure there's a lot of thinking into that, but I'll shut up for now and kind of just uh send it over to you, and just, I guess, what kind of thoughts did you have over last season, and then we can kind of talk any specific strategies you thought kind of helped you carry through.
Yeah. I love getting into the philosophy side of it. When I looked at it and saw 16 teams, and it was funny in the beginning, we started with, I think, 18 rounds, and then we said, ah, let's go to 20. And then I forget which one of you, but one of you was like lobbied for one more. So we had 21 rounds, which, 8 hours a pick. It was a long, like it
That's
took us
right.
forever to finish. But my going into it, I was on the later side, so I knew I had a nice turn to still get some elite talent. And in PPR, just through my years of fantasy, I've noticed that receivers just have the higher floor. And so I wanted, especially in a best ball league that's this deep, you're going to have bench guys that throw up duds. I wanted guys, and I drafted pretty much the same way this year, just guys that I knew would catch the ball or at least be part of a week by week game plan. And so, Amon Ra is probably the blueprint of like he's going to catch 5 balls a game. I don't know the full stats, right? But just felt good at the turn. Was hoping he was still going to be there. And then CD is just like I'm a long time, fan of his. So it just felt good in the beginning. Um, as far as coming back, I went running back, and I just needed to balance the team out. If I went too heavy in one position, I just, with the amount of teams that we had, it just didn't feel like it would ever make sense. And in best ball, thankfully, injuries and all that don't matter as much because you're going to start your best lineup every time. So if I went too receiver heavy too early and then I end up drafting a gem, like I know DJ Chark did some stuff for me last year, for
That's right.
example, like
Week
having a guy
16, I
like,
think it was.
yeah,
He went
yeah, it was
off
in the
like
playoffs.
27 points or something. Yep.
Yeah. So knowing that there was always those boom potentials, I didn't think it would be smart to invest in one position too much too early. Especially I'm not, this was actually my first best ball league. I'm not sure if it's custom to have the double flex there. But, the fact that you could start up to 4 receivers there, four running backs, I guess, if you're that lucky. But, that idea of trying to balance it out just made a lot of sense in my head because I knew for sure 2 and 2 would have to be there. When it came to punting tight end, that was just mere circumstance. Uh, as I was focusing on other positions, it was just flying off. And so it was kind of like, let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I overdrafted the position just with guys that had upside. And yeah, I think between Jawan, Chig, Ferguson for sure. It ended up being good enough where like one of them would have a good week every week and or good enough. I again seventh seed. It wasn't a beautiful season by any means, And felt the same way with quarterback that, you can only start one. It's not a super flex. And if you have two guys and you can kind of just play the matchups, hopefully one of them can get you, I don't know, 200 yards and two touchdowns a game. I would say that's like my typical, if I'm gonna punt, that's kind of what I'm going for in a quarterback. If you can get 202 and just play a clean game of football, and then let the guys that you drafted early do their thing, that's usually enough to set you apart. So, yeah. And then I also, one guy you left off, and I'm shocked that you did, was Zeke. I took Zeke,
It's
and
true.
he wasn't on a team yet. And yeah, he ended up being, I mean, he had a great year. He was catching the ball, running the ball. That Patriots offense, somebody had to make some moves, and Ramondre went down for a little bit. So yeah, I went with some guys that just either had the history or just felt good. And it's hard when nobody mocks for the 13th on. It's just whatever happens. So, but yeah, I planted my flag with receivers early that I thought had the upside. And I think I had, like, looking back, I think I had Pittman as well, right? Or no, yeah, I had Pittman and Godwin, and they were also just PPR guys that did a great job. But to win a league like this, you need a lot of luck. Minshew starting most of that year probably really helped Pittman's stock. What was going to happen with the Tampa, offense ended up working out. So yeah, and then I busted with Miles Sanders. So thank God I had, Zeke and Kareem to do something for me. So it was, I skated by, but I skated by just well enough, you know.
For sure, too. I mean, I think even if you look at it's funny if you look at this year and you're telling me you can get Lamb and St. Brown on the same team, it's like it's impossible now, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, they're going just picks apart in the first round now. So, I think to your point, finding receivers that are safe and have high upside, I think is crucial in almost every fantasy league format. Honestly, if you can find a degree of a floor that have those potential boom weeks as well. So yeah, as we know,
Yeah.
Lamb was wide receiver one last year, and St. Brown was not too far behind him too. So definitely a great way to start your draft for sure. And
Hmm.
a couple other things that you said too is something to touch on is, when you're punting a position, it's important to recognize when you're doing it. If you do pass on key rounds where you're punting it, like it's important to just roll with it, right? Because then, as you said, you ended up getting, more of a positional advantage and get a well-balanced team on your position players, after you
Yeah.
knew you're going to punt your quarterback too. So that helped you grab guys like Godwin and Pittman and guys like that because you knew hey, I'm punting quarterback, so let's just get this well-balanced team. So
Yeah. I mean, that was easily the reason I was able to win the league. I want to say, you'll have to fact check me with Godwin, but Pittman, ARSB, and Lamb were all top 15 guys in PPR. So, to have three top 15 and one overall in a 16 team league, it was a force multiplier. And then, Godwin wasn't too far behind.
for
Um,
sure.
so that was, yeah, easily the biggest reason there was positive movement there. Um, and I think it was a learning curve for a lot of people because you can't rely on one quarterback. I mean, unless Josh Allen's going to have down weeks, every quarterback will have a week where they're not giving you what you need. It's just kind of how NFL works, unless you have Manning that one year way back in the day. Um, so yeah, it's important to, kind of cover all those bases, and it just made sense that if you could probably committee a quarterback and just play those matchups a little bit better than other positions. And then one other thing with the receivers, I meant to say this earlier, but the reason I went with floor guys early was just the way that a typical fantasy football board is set up. It's not set up for best ball. So guys like a Gabe Davis, a DJ Chark, those kind of random Jalen Hyatt, I think even had a couple big touchdown weeks. Those kinds of guys are way down in these ADP draft boards. If you take your floor guys early, you can pick your, best ball boom potential people late. And that's something that I learned last year that I'm definitely using in our draft this year, where if I can start with floor guys that are cornerstone pieces, I can take big swings later in the draft versus early. And, big swings early won't win you the league, but it'll lose you the league.
For
So,
sure. I love that point. I think that's a very crucial detail to it. I love that you brought that up because, yeah, just drafting. Usually you don't lose your draft in the first rounds if you're playing safe. If you know they're guys that are gonna put output, even if I mean you lucked out, you got the number one receiver too, but even if they're just top five, top tens, that's gonna do you well. And if you can hit on those guys in the mid to late rounds too, especially in best ball, I mean anytime anybody brings up Gabe Davis, everyone knows I'm a Gabe Davis fan too. So
yeah,
uh but yeah, I mean, grabbing your boom players in best ball is it's fun, right? Because you're looking at the guys that you're in regular fantasy leagues you're scared to start, but in best ball you're like, oh, okay, send them my way, right? Because you're just waiting for those three touchdown weeks or something like that. So that's a great point that you make. Just as you said, start safe and then start rolling the dice a little bit later. So I definitely love that point as well. And just continuing even the conversation on punting positions too. I mean, it's interesting though. I know you brought up luck, and I'll steal one from the commish. This is a saying he says a lot. Where fantasy in the season, he believes it's 80% skill in the season, 20% luck. But come playoff time, you just flip those numbers right around, and then
sure.
playoffs, 80 luck, 20 skill at that point,
Yeah,
right? So, um, I. I do agree with that. There's like 80-20 rule in life and in a lot of different examples, but in
yeah.
fantasy, I definitely agree with that. And like Ferguson's another one where, I look at Ferguson last year. I was high on him too, but it's funny, they drafted they had two rookie tight
Yeah, like
ends.
Maker and someone else. Yeah.
Exactly, where some of the dynasty guys are like, oh, it's going to be one of those those draft guys, but no, Ferguson came through, and I think he's the one after Schultz left. It was writing on the wall that Ferguson did enough. He could be the starter on that next year. So I think just knowing that information and grabbing Ferguson in the 13th round too, I think really helped you because he was a top 10 tight end as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was really high on him and Juwan Johnson. I just knowing that Carr, like, he was in an offense there in New Orleans, and I hate talking about rival teams. Not a big fan of the Saints, not a big Falcons guy. I can respect the Bucks. I feel like their fans and just what they've been able to accomplish pretty cool. Um, but yeah, it's funny. I just had a feeling that he kind of caught fire near the end of the season before. I was like, he could be a guy in this offense. He's a little older, so yeah, not on like the dynasty radar. But at that point in the draft, I mean, I want to say, yeah, Taysom went right after him. So maybe if the script was flipped, I could have went Taysom instead, another, best ball legend. But yeah, it kind of was just I knew Chig would start. I didn't know how Levis would play. Had a feeling that Carr would be able to pepper at least one of those guys, and Jawan just felt like a good weapon that was catching fire at the end of the previous year. And then yeah, Ferguson. I again, this is probably something fact checkable, but I want to say the backup Shoemaker had like a fairly decent year if you drafted him in in a best ball format, he would have been in your starting lineup a couple times. He was still getting red zone looks and all that. It
yeah,
helps when Dak's throwing what 35, 36 touchdowns, but and I'm sure that'll regress. But he wouldn't even be a terrible pick in late drafts this year.
for
Um,
sure. I mean,
so
considering how deep, this league was with 16 teams, one thing about the tight end position, I know we're kind of harping on it a little bit about, the fact that you're drafting it earlier. It's funny, I just wrote a blog over our completed draft in league number two. One of the riskiest players I said was Trey McBride, which I know he's a darling right now, and I grabbed McBride in the fourth, but I love McBride and I know he caught fire last year too, but I mean, tight ends are is a risky position because if they're not a top five tight end, and you draft them early and they fail, all those position players around them, will outscore them, like your wide
Oh
receivers, your
yeah.
running backs for sure. So, that's like the Josh Jacobs round and players like that, that's probably going to score more points overall
Hmm.
than McBride. So if McBride does not come up with a top five season, doing your strategy of last year of waiting on tight end, grabbing like a Ferguson that has more of that upside in the 13th round, sometimes is a better strategy than getting one of these high, big name tight ends as well.
Yeah. It's funny. I was going to give a hot take and then realized I drafted Kittle in the sixth this year. But tight end is just the drop off in tier, however you want to call it. That drop off is easily the most severe. And so for me, I took Kittle this year, but he was that last one in that tier that I would have taken. And then after that, it's just it's kind of Njoku, Ingram. Is Ingram going to be able to catch 100 balls again? I don't know. Probably not.
Right.
So there's, a couple guys there that sure could be worth it, but I would much rather have, the receivers that are being taken around that, around that spot. And so last year, I had told myself it made no sense to take an early quarterback or an early tight end in a league like ours because of just the types of players that would need to make the lineup. Where in most 12, 10 team leagues, there's decent quarterbacks on the waiver wire. I was like, if I have three of them, two of them, one of them's going to do good enough,
Yep.
16, 18 points. And so that's this year it's a little different with 12. And I figure having a good tight end, at least one that like Kittle, what he broke 1,000 yards. He had 5 or 6 touchdowns, like good enough to where I think it's a force multiplier. And he has enough of like a history where McBride really doesn't have the track record yet. Neither does Laporta. I think Laporta is a very risky pick at ADP. And
Right.
that's late second, early third. It just feels risky. Like, is he going to catch 10 touchdowns again, catch almost 90 balls? That's really tough for a tight end to do, albeit consistently. So, yeah, Kittle this year for me was it just was that last guy that you could feel like there was some sort of consistency to his performance. But I definitely have my sleepers for tight end that I know I want to lean on late, like super late.
Perfect.
Um,
Yeah. I like
so
this year's sleepers at tight end as well. Um, but hey, I think we said a lot of like great nuggets there, and I think the one that you started with, I think for everyone to just kind of recap there is just know your league. Especially if you're in like a custom league like this one was with a 16 team, definitely changes your strategy at times. I mean, the only reason I met you in the playoffs is knowing this league was so deep. Um, it's funny. I knew though in those late rounds, there's literally almost nobody left that's, really worth much. There's a few diamonds in the rough, but I remember I drafted Easton Stick for Herbert's backup and Davis Mills for CJ Stroud, which it's funny. They both got hurt at the exact same time. And to your point, Easton Stick, the game where the Raiders blew them out, I think they scored like 60 points on them. Easton
yeah.
Stick still threw three touchdowns. There's over 21 points from Easton
Hmm.
Stick, So to your point, and it's know your league settings on a 6 point passing. I mean, guys like that can come up, out of nowhere too. So, I mean, that's not gonna be the same story in all the main formats as well. So yeah, just
Yeah.
take a look at your scoring formats, kind of know your league before you start the draft it's tough saying
Yeah.
you know exactly who you're gonna pick before the draft, but just kind of know your do's and don'ts.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll take it a step further. It's more than just knowing your league as far as scoring, it's format. It's totally you should be approaching a best ball draft differently than, your typical or standard league. Also very different from a dynasty. The way you draft in all of these is extremely different. So it's I took a funny enough a similar approach to what I want to do in my typical leagues where I have a little bit of a foundation, but you'll catch me, dead with some of the risky picks that I'm going to be taking in this league. It just doesn't. It usually just doesn't work out that way. You want to have a little bit more consistency because there are consequences to having a bad starting lineup versus best ball. You can take as many risks and swings as you want. So, just being okay to look at players differently. And I made a mistake. I don't know if we want to get into this year's draft quite yet, but just learning that and maybe changing that mindset. I made a mistake in our draft already that I wish I could go back and change. So, yeah, it's definitely important to know what your draft, like what your scoring is, but also the league that you're in and, what kind of risks are you able to take?
For sure, for sure. I guess on that note, let's talk a little bit about 2024. And as I mentioned, in this particular league, we did drop it back down to the 12 teams, still 6 point passing, full point PPR. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess if we want to talk a little bit about 2024, we've talked strategy, like, any strategy changes or just any of your favorite picks maybe you want to bring up so far in your draft. I know we can
Yeah.
talk in the past, probably don't want to give the future away considering it's a live draft. But if you want to talk any of the
Hey,
past
I'm happy to
picks,
give
go
the
ahead.
future. Yeah, totally happy to give the future because, with sports, um, people want the sushi. They want to know what's current and what's coming up. They don't want the fish sticks, the old news. It's fun to look back and talk about it, especially, yeah, the Cinderella run was great, but this year, while I love having that gold medal in our chat, it's more than it's about backing it up. It's about staying in the top league. This year, I wanted to go with a similar wide receiver heavy early approach. And funny enough, I wanted to go almost full, very different to what I did last year. But because of 12 teams instead of 16, I had a feeling that I could go heavy running back in the later rounds. Initially, I wanted to come to this draft, just take 5 top receivers out of the gate, and then just maybe take one Gabe Davis type at the end. But know that I had a foundation, bye weeks, injuries, whatever. I would have guys that we could, feel good about. And then I can just throw those late picks at running backs. That was the initial idea and the main factor of that being the teams being smaller. So there was going to be probably a heavier focus on receivers, a little bit more competition, knowing that running backs would fall. But again, I stuck to my own gut and kind of the tiers that I had in my head. So when like a guy like Josh Jacobs fell to the fourth, I said, okay, all right, receivers are going off way faster than I thought. Other people had a similar strategy to me. One guy has 5 right now, and his team's looking strong, because
Yep.
there are still good enough running backs in a best ball format to where you can feel better about picking up a guy like Aaron Jones as your RB1 in the fifth or sixth. Uh, so where I went AJ Brown, Marvin Harrison, and the reason I went with them is AJ Brown, uh, as safe a floor as a guy that you can get there at the 110. He's been a top 10 guy. You know, felt felt right. On the turn, Harrison was really the last one in that tier that I really liked. Not a big Devontae guy this year. Um, I like Olave, yeah, but I think Harrison has a ceiling that he could finish as a top 5. I would say I'm bullish on the Arizona offense this year. I'm sure you saw the news about Kyler coming out today. leaps and bounds ahead. I think they're a very intriguing, exciting team with the similar trajectory to the Texans. A lot of young early draft picks this year. Quarterbacks solid, at least got a name to them. I think they're interesting. Tough division, but they're interesting. So he just felt like a safe, even though he's a rookie, felt safe enough to where he's going to get the targets. He's going to put up numbers. McBride to that end as well. So yeah, that felt good. And then where my mistake was round three. I had a choice between Pittman, Cup, Debo. There's another guy I'm missing, Metcalf, DK Metcalf.
Mm,
And
yep.
I went with Pittman, probably a little bit more of a emotional pick, just the fact that he helped me so much last year win the league. But in hindsight, I think that would have been the right time to take Debo, just a guy that has an incredible best ball ceiling, um, but maybe not as much of a floor due to injury and all that other stuff. So I think if I could do it again, I would feel safer or feel more exciting to go with a guy like Debo. Where come playoff time, if he's healthy, I think I'd rather, you know, bet on him to outscore Pittman in those like playoff weeks when it really matters. But Pittman caught 100 balls. Richardson's going to need a guy, and his comp's Cam Newton. And if that's true, because we've only seen 4 games from the guy, if it's true, Cam fed his number ones, and Pittman's in a prime year right now. He's 26, right? Like that's your prime as a receiver. So if it's not this year, I mean, maybe he's just a flash in the pan, but it felt good enough. But I think Debo might have that higher ceiling that you might want in a best ball format.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we say it now, but who knows what the fantasy script writers have in store for us
Sure.
in this season. So, I mean, that's where the whole fun of it comes in. I mean, you kind of looking at like, the what if scenarios as well, but that's where it's also fun where like that's where you never know, the difference between Pittman and Debo. Even if Debo starts off on fire, you never know what happens. Maybe Pittman has the playoff run, that you need or something like that. So, that's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting, topic there. And then I think one other key thing that you said I kind of want to kind of hit hard on is the power to adapt. I think in your draft where if you do have a baseline structure that you're going for, it's interesting because yeah, the heavy wide receiver approach is one of the more common approaches these days. And if everyone else has that strategy, you gotta be willing to draft and go back to your roots of tier-based drafting at times. And yeah, when
Mhm.
Jacobs drops to the fourth, when his ADP is usually around the third, I mean that's a whole round drop. So I think that's a smart move to be able to say, you know what, I know I was going with the strategy, but it's hard to pass up Jacobs in the fourth too. So I think that's very
Yeah.
important in
Yeah,
fantasy
you
too.
said do's and don'ts earlier, and I kind of do that with players, and I am big on Jacobs. I also took Kenneth Walker fell to the 5'10, which, is almost a 6 round pick. That feels pretty far down for how consistent he's been so far. Um, yeah, it came to the point where I was like, yeah, I had a strategy to go with these higher floor guys, but and you don't necessarily have to draft for value. Like, oh, I'm picking him. He's falling. I have to take him for the value. Um, I like those players, so for me,
Yep.
it was a lot easier. It just felt double good. It's like not only do I like them, but I'm getting them at a perceived value. So it made it was an easier pill to swallow when I was like, okay, these receivers that I totally thought would be there are not. Um, thank God the running backs that I like are.
Right.
And yeah, and then it was coming back around after Kenneth Walker, and I had a chance to. I could have done the Kyler Harrison stack, which is something I had written down for this best ball draft. I was like, I should get Kyler in this league because I don't know if I'd trust him in a non best ball. But when I saw Kittle there and then just the drop off in tier after that. I'm not a guy that likes to take a risk on a guy like Pitts or I don't know if Ingram can do it again. So it just felt like given the depth that quarterback inherently has in a one QB league, the value that I got with Kittle, I think I can supplement the same way I did last year by punting quarterback, but picking some guys like, and this is where maybe if people in our league are listening, I can get screwed. But I like Rodgers. I think Rodgers has an
Yep,
easy schedule. He's old, but and coming off injury, but the schedule's easy. He's got a great O line. He's got great weapons. Um, you can take 15 people before he's really like on the radar, at least ADP wise or draft board wise.
for
And there's
sure.
a
And
couple others down there that I totally feel okay with. Don't sleep on my Panthers. Bryce Young's going like QB 20 something. I would gladly take him as like a QB 2 or 3 in this kind of format. So there's guys where, I don't know if I can get a perceived Kittle value or even like half of that at the kind of rounds that I might be getting value still at quarterback. So again, I think it's due to the team that going from 16 to 12 really is a big difference for some of these. I would say the two biggest positions where it makes a difference is quarterback and running back, where you should be able to wait and get value. Um, I did it for quarterback, but I like those running backs too much not to. So
yeah, I mean, and then, with the 6 point passing, what that does is it actually devalues rushing quarterbacks a little bit as well, too. So where,
yeah,
your pocket
I mean it's
passes,
still
it
the
kind of helps them
yardage.
out. Yep,
Yeah, they're still getting the yardage, so it's not a ton, but yeah, it kind of evens the playing field for those guys that are, like the Dak Prescotts that are just going to stand in there and sling it. Um,
for,
so yeah, we'll see if he falls. Right now, I'm looking at our live draft board. Another pick just went. Somebody just took Aaron Jones. So right now, I mean, there's still a good 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 plus 10, 14 picks before me. But we still have like Dak, Love. I like Purdy if Purdy falls. We haven't had a quarterback run yet, but why not take
sure
a
that'll
gamble
happen.
on a guy like Caleb, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah. I think I ended up getting Purdy in the eighth round too. So I was ecstatic with that value too. So yep. And then I think
yeah,
on your Kittle pick, I mean, we earlier in the episode we talked news and we talked to Ayuk. I mean, if Ayuk does, I know we think he's gonna stay with the Niners, but if he does get traded, look what that'll do with Kittle's value as well. I think he
yeah,
will have an even bigger year too. So be
yeah. It's
interesting
going
what
to free up those
happens.
targets. Cool. If Kittle can do what he did last year with Ayuk there, I don't see why he couldn't do it again, if not, better if Ayuk leaves. Yeah, I think at value, like in the sixth round, it's just a great value for a guy that has put up the numbers in the past. And really, yeah, he had the surgery, but they're saying he's going to be all right. I watched him on receiver and thought he was freaking awesome. So, and
Yep.
that's another side of it. Like I like to pick guys that are on fun teams to watch or that are kind of electric, right?
Yep.
So, CD Lamb, Thanksgiving, it's got a little extra fun to it. You're with your uncles,
That's true.
family, whatever, and you're just like, I got him in fantasy, so we're gonna root for him today. But
For sure.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see. These long drafts are fun. They stay engaging, but I'm ready for that pick because I do think this seventh, eighth round is a good time for me to take that first quarterback. I just don't want to miss the run too far. And I got
Yep.
just lucky enough last year in that 16 to get two starters because, I mean, we had some teams that only had one and
Yep.
then they go down and then that's it.
Yep.
So,
Say
yeah,
bye bye.
it's
Yep.
yeah, super,
But
super exciting stuff. And there's still receivers that I really like that are coming up. So I think right now, if I was to give you the keys to the kingdom, I think I go quarterback and come back and I'll just reach for Deontay Johnson. I think that's
love
what
it.
I'd so.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. I actually just wrote a blog the other day over our recap, our finished draft, and Deontay was one of my favorite picks from a fantasy manager. They got Deontay in the ninth too, so that was great value too. Yeah, I think we're talking value, we're talking upside. I guess to kind of tie this in a knot today. What we love to do is kind of end the show sometimes on hot takes.
Oh,
So
love it.
so what I'll do, maybe I'll say mine first. Give you a little bit of time to think about. Maybe you can make it a little extra juicy with someone that you've picked already. So I'll go ahead
Okay.
and say my hot take. I ended up getting George Pickens in our best ball draft in the sixth round, and I'm gonna say he gets over. I'm gonna say he gets over 12 touchdowns this year in
Wow.
2024. I think he's got a
That's
12 touchdown year.
You
So
could have
that's
said
my
10 and that's still a hot take, dude.
yeah. I'm going
All
12. That's
right.
my hot take. So I'll go with George
Okay.
Pickens 12 touchdowns this year.
Who's throwing him those touchdowns?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Either
Hey,
QB. I mean Wilson
his
gave
talent's
us.
unreal.
That's right. I mean, Wilson made Sutton a top three last year, and Fields made DJ Moore top 10 as well. So, like I said, either one, I'm happy with throwing him the ball.
Yeah, Pickens is an unreal talent that I think has been slept on because of how bad that offense has been. I think that's a great hot take.
All right. Well, yeah, not to put you on the spot, but what do you got for us? You got any
Oh,
hot
I
takes for
got I
your
got
team this
plenty.
year?
I'll start big and I'll work my way down to my team. Hot take that I have for like just teams overall. I think the Chargers underwhelm with Harbaugh in year one. I think maybe 5, 6 wins. I think their win loss is like 8.5, 9. I just don't see it.
You like
They
the
don't
under?
have many offense. Yeah, I would smash the under. I'd smash the
Okay.
under at 7.5.
Nice.
I just don't really see that offense doing much, even though Herbert's quite talented. It's a big cultural change there, and they're going to have to make a lot of scheme changes with their personnel to get to where they want to be. I know like Alt's a great pick for them. O line should be improved, but when you're throwing to Palmer and what Quentin Johnson, uh, Lad could be interesting. Like it's hard to see that come together and just their culture of finding ways to lose. I just don't really see them performing. So that's like I guess an AFC hot take, NFC hot
I
take.
like that.
Um, I want to say the Cowboys missed the playoffs.
Ooh, that
That
is
would
the one.
be,
That's
yeah,
hot.
I think, yeah, that's the hot take. I think there's just better teams on the rise. I'm pretty bullish on like Cardinals, Seahawks. I think that whole NFC West is just stacked, and three of those teams could make it. Same with the NFC North. You got the Lions and the Packers that are for sure deserving. I think the Bears could make it. So that really doesn't leave a lot of, somebody's going to make it from the NFC South, probably with a losing record. And then, well, the Falcons have gotten a little better. And then, yeah, the NFC East, I mean, the Eagles still have the personnel, but the Cowboys are just, I see a pretty big decline quickly. Not sure how that offense is going to look. Is it this year that Kellen Moore left, or was it last year?
Last year he left.
Yeah,
And
last year,
he's
right? And
had
then they had
two job changes
yeah, and then they
since.
had the old Packers coach doing his thing. I forget his name off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
yeah, I would say
McCarthy.
that's my hot take. I don't love the defense as much as I did last year. No Gilmore anymore, and like, I just they don't have what I think a winning team needs this year. They don't really have like an established running back room that they can lean on. Dak's gonna have to go back and throw it a ton, and their O line isn't as good. Yeah. So okay. So that's AFC, NFC, and then I would say for my own fantasy team, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go for like 110 and 1500, with
I
like
love it.
110 catches, 1500 yards, and I'll go. I don't know, 11 touchdowns. I
Ooh, I
think,
like that. I like that. I drafted him in a dynasty startup this year, and I caught a lot of heat for drafting him in the first round, but I love him as well. So I
yeah,
hope that one's right.
yeah, I think, I'm just looking at our draft. I think he can outperform. I think Tyreek and CD are still pretty glued to the ceiling there, but I think he maybe Chase and Amon-Ra as well. But I think there's a case to be made that he can possibly, I don't know, possibly outscore Jefferson. We'll see how that quarterback and just that team looks. He is a, quarterback proof type player. But from a fantasy perspective, if the touchdowns maybe aren't there, Harrison could totally compete. Garrett Wilson, we'll see. He might outscore AJ Brown, Puka, some of those guys that are going up there with him. I think the stars are aligning for him to have just like an incredible year.
I
So I
love
guess
it.
that'll be my hot take. Yeah.
I love it. Well, that's a great way to end the show and in the interview there. But hey, it's been a pleasure. It's been fun talking best ball. I know it'll be fun chatting with you all season long and but also keeping tabs with you on Twitter. Once again, that's Panther fan _10 on Twitter. Like I said, all you Panthers fans, please unite for Anthony TPF.
Yeah, let's trauma bond this year, guys. It's been rough. It's been a rough 20, what, 25, 30 years, but it's fun when we're all bitching there together. So excuse my French, but when we're all complaining and not at each other, but like on the same page of, damn, this year's tough. It's a family feeling. So we trauma bond. We enjoy the 2 wins we get every year, and yeah, it's a good time. So
For sure, for sure. But yeah, if you loved this episode, definitely hit us up next year. We're gonna be, looking to expand this best ball league even further. So we're already up to 3 leagues and we can see, each year how much we can keep adding to the competition. So Anthony, once again, thank you. And as we always end the show with a good old peace.